How do you see that playing a role to help the tenants get the more balance that you just spoke of?
Yeah. So foreign investors globally, and there's a small number of global banks that build a very large number of homes in every market, and we force them out of the Australian market. And as a consequence, now significant reduction in the volume of apartments commencing construction. But politicians play to a particular dynamic, and it's important to point out that foreign investors cannot buy established homes in Australia. They can only build new. They have been prohibited from buying established homes since 1976. So this argument that foreigners are buying our houses and forcing up house prices is just untrue. They have to seek individual approval from the Federal Treasurer through the Foreign Investment Review Board, and I think there were 1,300 homes purchased last year by foreigners, established homes purchases by foreigners out of 500,000 homes. So it's a very, very small volume. Not able now, that restriction on investors buying established homes exists for very good reason. We do want housing is a necessity, and we don't want it to be an investment stock for the global share market. That's not desirable. But we definitely want foreign investors building new homes. And it is that constraint on foreigners building new homes that politicians play on that, and they certainly dog whistle to underlying racist attitudes within the community, suggesting that foreigners are taking homes away from Australians. And there can be some truth to that. And certainly overseas migration, international students, the stories there, there has certainly been a significant increase in demand as a consequence of that. As I mentioned before, went from 175,000 net overseas migration to zero, now to 550, and likely to be sustained well above 350 for some years. But that's not what I'm referring to, and that's not the taxes that we're referring to are taxes on foreign banks, foreign superannuation funds. Those global investors that have probably never been to Australia certainly aren't visa holders because they're not individuals. They are global banks, global superannuation companies that we want to attract into our market to get those apartments over their 50, 80% critical sales that they need in order to get homes to. And it is that acute shortage of investment of any form that is central to getting to that 1.2 million or achieving an adequate supply of housing stock.
So let's simplify that down really to something that our community can grasp really quickly. There might be an opportunity to build 500 apartments in a complex. And let's say those foreign investors want to own 50 or 80 or even, whatever that is. Let's call it 100. There's still 400 other properties that will come to market as part of that development. And if those 50 or 100 don't get built, the 500 don't get built. So
That's
that
right.
money doesn't come in here, then ultimately it's a detractor in terms of the overall supply of stock in this country. So Tim, you did mention you thought that was the biggest own goal for both Queensland and New South Wales in terms of those provisions that they put in there to tax the investor out of the foreign investor out of the market. Looking at the same sort of information and changes and legislation change that we've seen in Victoria, windfall taxes, reforms to the way in which properties are managed down here, and all of those additional costs. Do you feel like you talked about a net loss overall? They're thinking this is great, we're going to get some extra tax revenue, but they don't get that economic growth story of which they get a greater pie of which they can pull that tax revenue from. Is that a similar story that's happening also in Victoria?
Yes, Victoria's really only a couple of years behind Sydney in introducing all these taxes. And as you mentioned, they've probably gotten a little bit ahead in the past couple of years. You tax new residential land at a time when it's extraordinarily expensive and you want to increase supply. The value capture tax in economics is a very good theoretical tax. And if what you were doing was getting rid of other developer taxes and replacing with a more efficient tax, that would make sense.
Yeah.
But just adding another one on top of it and arguing that it's an efficient tax, that's not a good public policy outcome.